G'day, Michael. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How's your day been?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. I want to talk to you about why you're a landscape photographer. What is it about landscapes and what is it about photography that draws you to it?
Landscape photography for me, well, I guess it probably has a lot to do with where I live. So being from Alaska, living in Alaska, growing up in Alaska, it's kind of one of those places that's like the last, our last frontier, and it really is. There's so many people that are fascinated with my home state that over the years, being an avid outdoorsman, I just love being outside. I just love being in nature, and the backyard, if you will, that I grew up in is just so vast and immersive that everybody wants to experience that, see it themselves. And so for me, it really became more about kind of bringing that to the forefront for those that can't come up here and experience it, or might not ever be able to due to whether it's mobility issues or whatnot. But no, just to be able to kind of bring the immerse myself amongst nature and in the landscapes of what I live in, Alaska, to those that can't. And so that's probably like what really drew me in, and then just seeing that there's a lot of interest there and a lot of people, and then just kind of helping bring that to them.
Yeah, nice. I think you're my first Alaskan photographer, and certainly I've not been there, but I have been to Canada, been up the Northwest Territories and so forth. So I'm kind of familiar with some of the terrain there, and British Columbia with the Rockies. So you've got it all, though. You've got mountains, you've got sea side, you've got forests, you've got pretty much everything you can think of: lakes, rivers, streams, waterfalls, the whole shebang. And I guess in that playground, what's your favorite place or type of place to get into? What's the landscape that draws you the most?
So for me, I would say I'm a fairly kind of a big vista guy, or type
Mhm.
of photographer. So being in the mountains definitely is a big attraction for me as far as my landscape photography goes. But it's also being on the coastline as well. Now, granted, Alaska, like, we do have a little bit of everything, rainforests, alpine, Arctic, mid-alpine. But what we do lack in some regard is like the amount of sea stacks, essentially, like along the
Yeah, right.
coastline. So the some sea stacks that we do have, some of them are kind of inaccessible to photograph from vantage points that you can get to by car. So I would say, like the lakes and streams and the mountains is kind of like a big draw to me, but all aspects of it. But long exposure photography is what I really enjoy doing a lot, and even during the daytime. So that's probably why I get drawn to the water so much, is, playing with that shutter speed to dictate the motion in the water, or totally just eliminating it and making it just totally smooth as glass. And I get, I wouldn't say hounded or from some of my peers and friends about it, because we'll be out shooting, and they're playing with a quarter shutter, or maybe a second, and I'm over here doing like a 4 minute exposure, or the 3 minute exposure. And it's I just enjoy long exposures at all aspects, and if I see a moment to be able to do that, I'm pulling out my 10 stop filter, my 15 stop filter, and I'm focusing on that. So
Yeah.
mountains and water, it's kind of a good combo to be able to do those really super long exposures for me. And so that's probably why I'm such comfortable in that regard.
Yeah, I can appreciate the pressure you get put under sometimes by people you're photographing with. I'm, mind you, I tend to do the long exposures, ultra long, 7 to 10 minute
Hmm.
exposures. I kind of do them pre-dawn, and they're kind of a different sort of, for me, slightly experimental, because you never quite know what you're going to get, because you can't actually see exactly. You've got vague idea about where you are. You've got a vague idea about what your foreground looks like because you've used your headlamp to set that up, but you've got absolutely no idea what's going on in the water or the sky until that light sort of pops up. And that 7 to 10 minutes, what you capture in that is it's interesting at times. Some of the colors that come out are really interesting.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's always, and that's really like probably fun for it for me is you just don't know. I mean, you
Mm,
kind of envision, yeah, you know that the length of the exposure is going to like make the, say the surf along the coastline just totally glass. But what it also does, if you got a pretty foamy surf going on, is it'll actually create atmospheric, looks like fog or mist on the water
exactly.
surface that you wouldn't capture it otherwise. And so there's, rules are meant to be broken, and I love breaking them when it comes to photography. And you get a lot of people that kind of get stuck into that 1/4 to maybe 1 second for water motion, and that's where they live, and they don't exceed that.
Yeah,
When every
can't
kind is,
explore outside. Yeah,
yeah, outside the box, and that's what that bulb mode's for. Is
exactly.
dialing in however long of exposure you want and just see what happens. I mean, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, nice. So, what is photography in your life? Is it a side hustle? Is it your main game? What is it that you're wanting to do with it as well?
So for me, as of lately, over the last 5, 6 years, it's my full-time gig now.
Mhm.
It started off as a hobby where any fishing trips or hunting trips that we would go on, it's really started off as videography, and then that
Okay.
kind of into photography because I would make videos of our trips and our outings, and I still do to this day. But I also started to focus more on taking pictures, and that kind of led more away from the videography. Now it's being, here in Alaska, doing Northern Lights tours is obviously a big thing here in helping folks see the Northern Lights, helping them capture, photograph the Northern Lights. And that has started to develop into me building an expansion of that and doing photography workshops,
Yep.
not just here in Alaska, but as lower 48 is what we call it up here, and also internationally. So the photography is kind of my main focus in building and bringing, like-minded individuals. I know it sounds kind of cliche, but it really is about just bringing people together that enjoy photography and going to these locations to photograph this amazing stuff and helping anybody on that journey. Because I mean, I don't know everything about photography.
Yeah.
There's a lot that I will continue to learn, but if I can help somebody along the way on their journey that they're struggling, because we all start from somewhere and it's usually at the bottom,
Yeah.
and it's self-taught, a lot of YouTube videos, and so it's if I can help fast track that up for somebody else, that's rewarding. And especially when someone's literally watching the Northern Lights for the first time, even though I've grown up with this since I was a kid, I kind of relive it for the first time through their eyes.
Yeah.
And that, uh, I'm sorry, is that dinging through on your end?
No, didn't hear it.
Okay. Okay. So sorry. So that's kind of, reliving it for the first time is what brings me a lot of joy, especially when they're just as excited about it.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. And for you, when did photography become art? At what stage did you go, okay, this is an artistic expression. It's more than just capturing this vista or capturing this fishing trip or hunting trip that I'm on?
I would say probably after like probably like the first photo that actually turned out worth anything that I
Okay.
took on the camera. And I was looking at, and I was like amazed at just what a picture captured versus what I was getting on my video recorder.
Sure.
And just because, and I don't think then, like I really realized what was going on because, different shutter speeds and, the amount of light coming in on the sensor during those different settings. And so this is just like with the Northern Lights, you can video the Northern Lights, but it won't look anything remotely close to what you'll capture on a long exposure
Absolutely.
image. So that for me was just like probably a turning point of exploring. And it was probably a sunset photo. I'm guessing, if I can remember exactly, that really kind of turned me on because just the colors that were just kind of, the clouds were catching, and the
Yeah.
landscape was kind of kissed by. So that to me is probably what really started to want to pursue the photography more than the videography. And water was probably the first part of that really draw out the artistic vision is playing with the shutter speed to slow that down. So that's probably in all honesty, and I can't say that this is the first, but what really got me into a lot of the playing with the water was actually a trip to Australia. Yeah, so I had a Sony Cyber Shot. Even though I'm a Canon guy, I had a Sony Cyber Shot at that time. And a friend of mine took me to, forgive me if I totally get this wrong, but it's a national park that's outside of Sydney, heading up towards the Gold Coast. There's the Three Sisters rocks are there. There's a
Blue
waterfall.
Mountains National Park. Yeah.
Yes.
It was a 45-minute drive from where I am. Yeah.
Okay. So there was this cascading waterfall kind of coming down, and I just can remember sitting there taking pictures of that and not really liking the turnout. And it was because my shutter speed was just too fast.
Yeah.
And I can remember seeing, these other images of the bridal veil look, if you will, of the water silkiness to it. And I'm just like, how the heck do I, why am I not able to recreate
how
this?
do I do this without blowing out all the highlights? And
Yeah, exactly. So I sat there and played around, and I got close to that, but that kind of sent me on a path of trying to figure out, okay, I do like this look. How do I go about achieving that? And so that just kind of built me up on this path. I would say that was probably more like the artistic push in the direction of like you can just do so much more with photography than you can videography, and that's probably kind of why I just started to kind of stay on that path.
yeah,
And bring out that creative, artistic side, I guess.
you talked about learning how to take those long exposure shots of waterfalls and the like. What did you do? You obviously said, okay, well, I need to learn this. What did you do? Were you self-taught? Did you go and do some courses? Did you go and do workshops? How did you garner the knowledge you needed to do what you wanted to do?
A lot of it's trial and error. When I was in school, I played a lot of sports. And so the kids that did the photography, you're kind of like, I'm never going to use that skill. Why would I ever want to, take that class? And yet here I
was one of them, but I played sports.
So you understand, it's like now. So it was kind of a hard path, a fast track of learning, but it was a lot of YouTube workshops. I never really attended early on at all. And so probably because I also didn't really know too much about them.
Sure.
So a little bit of photography magazines, but really just a lot of YouTube is where a lot of my learning has kind of come in. Since then I've bought some online courses. And when I have the time, I try to sit down and, either as a refresher, or there's some of them I still haven't even completed just because of the lack of time that I have. And because I'm always wanting to kind of keep up and keep fresh, or you might even rewatch it and learn something that you totally missed.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's kind of how where I started to figure that stuff out. And like I said, but mostly trial and error.
Yeah, cool. And talking about your own desire to start doing workshops and sharing your knowledge and that sort of thing, where did that thinking sort of come from? Was that something that came a bit later and you kind of said, okay, well, I got to make money. This is one way of doing it. What was the thinking process going into that?
My thought process kind of started not too long after doing the Northern Lights tours. And and a lot of my friends and family have, told me, and praise my photography. But again, I kind of take some of that with a grain of salt, just because how close they are, and it's going to be biased. And my mom is my number one fan, and whose mom isn't?
Yeah.
And she thinks I should be, shooting for National Geographic, and I'm like, Mom, there's plenty of better photographers out there than myself. But what really kind of set me on that path was just the people that would be getting on these Northern Lights tours really wanting to, they had a camera on their shelf that they bought when their kids were young, and they hadn't touched it since the kids got old. And so they come back, or come all the way up here to Alaska, think I have a camera, I should be able to take pictures. And some of them, yes, we're able to help them out to where that does happen. But depending on like, especially the fixed lens, the zoom cameras, a lot of those, and especially the older ones, don't and can't manage the settings needed in order to photograph the aurora.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where things kind of started to spark for me. And when people that had a camera and a lens that would work were out there photographing, dialing in the settings that we had gone over, and just the joy that was kind of coming over their face, like they did this, like they actually successfully captured this image,
Yeah.
with help, of course, but the fact that they felt a self of accomplishment because they, granted, I gave them the tools needed, but they came out with the end result is kind of where, like, just seeing the joy on their face and just how things kind of started to maybe slightly click for them. That kind of got me thinking that, hey, maybe I should try to, expand on this. But then the feedback that I would get much later on, when they would go home, and if the aurora got as low in this to be seen in the state that they lived in, and they remembered everything that we went over, and they were actually able to go out and, capture it again without me being there. That's probably what really started to get me to really think about, well, maybe rather than just having these folks for one night and trying to teach everything that I can possibly help and teach them on in 6 hours, turn that into, a week-long ordeal or longer, depending on the location, or shorter, depending on, what it is that we might be photographing. Because that sense of joy and accomplishment that I was seeing from them was also, I was kind of also in the same way experiencing that, because I was like helping these folks. And so that's kind of been my forefront now, and my vision of expanding, face the outdoors photography is building this community
Yeah.
of folks. So,
No.
and helping any way I can.
Yeah. And when you're putting together one of these trips, obviously you're doing this quite a way out, because you're gonna have time to sell the spots. And in doing that, what are you also thinking about in terms of planning not only where you go, but all of the logistics behind it? Because everyone that runs a workshop knows that there's more to it than just turning up on the day, setting up and helping people with their camera settings. There's a bit more to it than that.
Yes, there definitely is. And so, for instance, my first international workshop, I took a group, we sold it out, 10 people to Lofoten Islands. I learned a lot on that first international workshop in that regard. But what kind of helped me out in that same instance is I partnered with a company over there to assist in the transportation because of the group size. And apparently Europe only makes passenger vans that are 9-seaters, whereas in the US here, we have 15 passenger vans, 12 passenger vans. So we had two vans, needed two drivers, and Norwegian law, come to find out, you have to have a Norwegian CDL passenger endorsement, like we do here in the US.
Yep.
Which I didn't have and wasn't even made aware of until after we got over there. So it all worked out in the end, but by collaborating with individuals from those areas, since I'm not able to, I always try to scout it out first if I can.
Sure.
However, going from Alaska to Norway, I would have loved to have done it, but it would have taken me, a month or better to really do some honest, hard scouting. So by utilizing their knowledge and expertise, they can kind of help fill in those cracks. And so what we like to look for essentially is to try to, while we're focusing on the photographing the light and the landscapes, is, for instance, when we're going to taking a group to Madeira here, we're going to be visiting a a vineyard, and people do a little wine tasting, just try to experience and take in a little bit of the culture of where we're at on our workshops without overrunning it in a way of how tourists, which is why I usually keep my group small, because just mass touristy locations can ultimately just be chaos.
Yep.
And but definitely don't want to bring that to our locations, but I do look for little activities that we can do to incorporate a little bit of photography in as well, if folks choose to, but get a taste and a sense of the culture of where it is that we're at.
Sure.
It's by relying on individuals' collaborations with other photographers in those areas really benefits from, because they know it better than me. It'd be like somebody coming to Alaska, and there's a lot of companies that do that aren't from here and might be familiar with that sort of stuff. So
Yeah. Well, what about the ones in Alaska? If you're going somewhere that's a little bit remote, it's got bears, could even have polar bears in Alaska, because you kind of got that crossover between the Kodiak and grizzlies and the polar bears. So, I mean, I don't want to stress the danger of going. It's not all about. But you think about some of those things when you're going into places like that.
yeah, we do have basically, like you said, the combo: polar bears up north, the interior grizzly bears and black bears, and then the coastal brown bears. I am running 2 workshops in the spring and the fall out to Lake Clark National Park to photograph the coastal brown bears. The nice thing about that location, and even though safety is always, like you said, top priority, but those bears have grown up with cameras, or the paparazzi, if you will, their entire lives.
Yeah.
There is no hunting pressure in that park.
Right.
So when I'm choosing destinations, whereas if we were to go, say, to the gates of the Arctic National Park, it's hard to say what might happen venture-wise. Again, not to stress the danger, but those bears aren't necessarily accustomed to people.
Yep.
They might run off. They might bluff charge. They might full-on attack. You just never know.
Yeah.
In Lake Clark, where these bears are, like I said, have grown up over the years since cubs, and then they bring their cubs back, and then they bring their cubs back. They're humanized to a point that they tolerate
They know you're there. They know you're not a threat.
Correct.
Yeah.
And like a sow will literally just be grazing along, and she'll bring her cubs right up to you. And the cubs might walk within 3 feet of you, or they might walk up and smell your boots. And she doesn't even give you a side eye. She's just focusing on what she's doing because she doesn't feel threatened.
Yeah.
Whereas, places like Yellowstone, where you see those people all the time, in my mind, are idiots running up and putting the camera in the animals' faces. While they are used to people, they're not totally used to the fact of that close.
Being approached, because if you're standing back and letting them come to you, that's a totally different, threat level in their minds to somebody approaching them. Yeah.
Sure. So they're people that get gored. You deserve that, in my opinion. So this experience, I've never really experienced like none other. So I've been out in the wilderness. Yes, I have been out hunting. Yes. And I have seen bears in the wild, but seeing a bear at eye level, 15 feet or closer away.
Yeah. Wow.
It kind of takes you to a different place. It's like you're doing a little soul searching inside. They'll be like, wow, this is actually happening kind of right now.
Yeah.
And so it's people, they have questioned me about the workshop, and they just don't know that they think that they could get that close. Or I show them the pictures I've taken from there, and they just freak out. But it's really not in the sense of the dangerous aspect. Granted, there's always a level. I'm not trying to play it off like it's not. I mean, the bear could have a bad day and decide, you know what, take it out on you.
Yeah.
But just being in nature, watching these animals go about their business, doing what it is that they do, and could care less that you're there to watch it. They're literally letting you into their home and showing you how they go about their daily lives. And that takes it to a whole other level of experience and feeling, as a photographer.
Yeah, nice. And what about those kind of logistics? Maybe not there, but I'm thinking maybe some of the more backcountry sort of things. What sort of logistics are you putting in place to make sure you've got shelter, you've got food, you've got everything you need before you're out there?
So those kinds of locations, for sure. So there's a lodge that Silver Salmon Creek Lodge is where we're going to be basing out in Lake Clark. So it's getting the logistics because you can't drive there. So we have to charter a bush plane. And so lining all that up then it comes down to hopefully the weather that day is cooperative to be able to fly out there. But once we get out there, there's cabins. There's only 4 permitted structures to be basically operating within the Lake Clark National Park. And so it's an old homestead that was kind of grandfathered in. And so it's not rustic. It's not, there are some workshops that you're out there sleeping in a tent and they're putting up a bear fence around you and hoping that a bear doesn't come visit during the middle of the night. This isn't quite to that adventurous, if you will. It's still adventurous, but not quite to like life
Not the
threatening.
same level. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's cabins, gourmet chef. It's luxury and adventure wrapped up in one package. So those remote locations, you kind of have to take into an account the type of clientele that you're potentially looking for, and mobility skill level sets. And so those will kind of dictate the locations of these remote workshops, but at the same time, then the logistic challenges and a lot of that is going to be, especially in Alaska, bush plains, because we only have so many roads here. Internationally, though, those can be surprisingly easier because you guys have more roads than what we would, have here. Excuse me, but Alaska is so big and vast that we can't occupy civilization, if you will, in a lot of the landscape. It's just uninhabitable. Whether it's permafrost, organic matter, there's just a number of reasons. Mountains, so other places there's more of those accommodations, if you will, close by or within those areas that cuts down in a lot of that logistics that you would run into remotely, like in Alaska and so on.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there's definitely a level of work and coordination that goes into behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk a little bit more about your personal work as opposed to the workshops and that sort of thing. How do you connect with a location? Is it instinct? Is it research? What are you doing to prepare yourself? Do you do pre-visualization, for example, before going out on a trip of your own?
I should, and I don't a whole lot.
But that's what interests me is, there's people that are full-on planners, and they know the kind of shot they want to get, and they've poured over maps and Google Maps and geolocated places that they think they want to put the tripod. They've even gone down to that level. But then there's other people that just go out, okay, well, I'm going in this general direction. My end goal is to go here, and what I find is what I find. And I'm interested in that spectrum of people. Where do you sit?
So for me, call it laziness, call it what you will. If I've never been to a location, I'll pull it up on Google or do a quick scan online maybe, and just to try to get somewhat of an idea. Once I get there, I kind of do a couple of things. If I'm really enjoying, like, what really drives it is the light. If I show up to a location, or if I finally find how to get there because of my lack of preparation before, and the lights crank in and I'm scrambling, I'm jumping right out with my dang camera, and I am literally trying to find something right off the bat and shoot it. Otherwise, I kind of show up to a spot and just kind of get my camera gear slowly out and kind of put together, but I'm constantly scanning the landscapes. And over the years, I've noticed, like, my eyes are always looking more straight out to up. And I've been trying to do better about looking, like, also more down, because one of the things that I've, have mentioned to folks is, like, when you're presenting, let's say on a overlook and you got this mountain range, like, that instantly draws you in, right? Your eyes are just consuming and eating all that up.
The big picture is all consuming.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not noticing the foreground or the midground or even the small intimate stuff that might even be, like, literally at your feet. And so you don't know where to point your camera. And so I've been trying to get better at slowing down my process of getting set up, but also to take that time to dissect and pick sections out of, whether it's the mountain range or if it's a coastal scene, parts of the beach, how the surf's, slapping against the rocks or whatnot. So that's really where I wouldn't say I take a lot of time doing that, but I can take it to where a lot of people are probably shot off 100 photos maybe, and I just haven't quite because I'm looking for that one thing that just speaks to me, and it might be just the way like light reflecting off of the surf, and like we'll be out hiking, me and my wife, and she'll be like, "Oh, that's pretty," and I'm like, "Yeah," and I just kind of keep walking on because my eye is not seeing what
Yeah.
she's seeing, and she's kind of wondering like, "Why didn't I take a picture of that?" And I'm just like, I don't see it. I'm not seeing what it is that you are, and it's just to me, it's not
Not
interesting.
speaking to you. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of places, if it's not really talking to me, and I'm sure, and a lot of photographers say this, and I don't try to mean to be like a cliche response to your question, but if I'm not feeling it in a way, or if it's not talking to me in a way that gets me focused on it, and then I'm like, okay, how do I want to present this? What is it that I'm aiming for? Do I like the way the light is? And how do I emphasize the light, or if it's the shadows, how do I want to emphasize that? And then I'll spend however long just dialed in on that, regardless of whatever's going on.
Mm.
And I found a trick that was mentioned to me is to, rather than look at everything with your eyeballs, look through just the viewfinder on the back of your camera.
Yep.
Then you'll put blinders on, and then you just kind of scan whatever it is you're looking at with through the back of that viewfinder, and eliminating all that noise. And you can find those little things that might speak to you a lot sooner than by just going at it full on visual aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it's a movie cliche where, the cameraman, the photographer puts his fingers up into a frame to look through it to sort of see the world. But in a way, what you're saying is almost exactly that. You've got to put a frame around it. And I was always taught, back when I did photography in school, was photography is as much about what you leave out as what you include in the frame. And looking at the edges of your frame, looking at the corners and saying, okay, do I want that in here? Do I want that out? And working the scene that way really helps you resolve that composition in my mind. I'm interested in what you've just said. It really sort of resonates with me in that that's kind of what you're trying to do, is exclude or include what you need or what you don't need, and getting that frame resolved in your mind before you actually start taking the shot.
Yeah, because and in that same regard, that process has started to lead me into doing more minimalist photo photography that I never really done. And I do like the look of a lot of that type of photography. And so that's also helped me, which I think is really probably the best way that I have come across at finding that minimalist composition, is just by the viewfinder and just blocking out all that added noise. And you can really, and then you top that into the really long exposures, and yeah, you've got kind of like a winning combo. It's just a matter of finding that one thing that's going to stand out as that subject matter for that type of photography. But yeah.
Yeah. I'm interested in what inspires photographers to bring about and infuse their own style and vision, and how you've sort of taken your style from where you started to where you are now. You talked a little bit about moving more from that grand vista towards more intimate, more minimalist sort of approaches. Obviously, there are no rules. One of the beautiful things about photography is you can throw all the rules away. But I'm just interested in how photographers develop their style and how they think about their photography in terms of going, okay, well, I used to do this, I now do this. These are some of the things that I've tweaked and changed. What is it that you've tweaked and changed and thought about, made you think about your photography differently?
I would say, looking back at, not that I still don't take grand vista photographs, because I definitely do. I would say in some of those types of shots, detail, texture, in some aspects and areas can get lost, because you're shooting a grand vista scene, let's say in the mountains, off in the distance. Really, all you're gonna maybe have some texture, and is gonna be in your foreground.
Sure.
If you're wanting, Antelope Canyon, for instance, is a great example of this. When you're shooting that Red Rock Canyon, and you're way the light's hitting the rocks, and you have all those little grooves from the wind eroding in the stone, and the little shadows that it leaves, and just the textures, and how all that, when the light hits it just right, kind of comes out. That to me is when you start to focus in on that. So when I took a trip to Antelope Canyon and started photographing those slot canyons, that I started to probably think, okay, there's nothing wrong with a nice tighter composition, focusing in, emphasizing that sort of stuff. So I kind of went from shooting, say, like super wide, if you will, and I've been incorporating more telephoto photography shots within my landscape photography, just because isolating a lot of the unwantedness or something that doesn't necessarily bring a whole lot to the composition has allowed me to focus in on those more intimate. But if I'm after or texture, contrast, and the light, and just sheer ruggedness of nature, that's going to allow me to really hone in on that and showcase that. And just recent trip to the Oregon coast was essentially just like that. I did a 5-minute exposure of the surf crashing the rock. You have this whole cliffside with a lighthouse and all that on there. And that, to me, yeah, I did take some pictures of that big vista, but I focused in on just where the light was coming in and just hitting that wet rock. And it was just illuminating it to where, to me, that was interesting. And the textures and the shadows of the rock face itself was also interesting. So what I didn't realize, as we were talking about beforehand, of the surprise of those long exposures turning out, the sun was also coming up.
Yeah.
And it just started to crest over the cliff, and I've got, after that 5-minute exposure, I have this beautiful sunbeams kind of coming down into the frame of light hitting that rock, and also by smoothing out that water, illuminating the water surface. And it's just an amazing photo of light and texture, motion, all wrapped in one, but in a nice compact version versus, shooting that bigger scene. So that's kind of taking me on the path of still shooting wide, yes, but also keeping and looking for those much smaller, more intimate details in photographs that tell a more powerful story, kind of like the David versus Goliath, of a stronger imagery than something much bigger. The school bully versus, the young sung hero who is just this scrawny little kid thing.
Yeah. Interesting. What is success for you in your photography?
Not overexposing or underexposing my success. I've never been one to really base success on validation of peers. So people get so hung up, and it's one thing that just drives me nuts about social media, is they get so hung up about thinking the level of success is judged by how many likes that they get on their images that they post, or how many views, that they might get. And to me, I am so frustrated with all that I don't even, before, like when I was starting out, that would kind of get under my skin. But in today's world, where literally every algorithm of every platform is chasing the other platform's algorithm, it's just nonsense. So for me, success comes from individuals who I've either helped along the way in some way, coming back to me, or, complimenting me on either whether it's my work or how I've inspired them on their work. And it also comes from when I look at other photographers' work and I'm interested in, okay, their editing style, let's say, or whatnot. And I don't ever try to copy anybody, but I do try to, if there's a certain look that I do like, try to figure out how I can kind of bring a little bit of that into my own work. I'm not a big fan of the overly HDR, really dreamy images. I try to keep everything as real as I can, as to like how our human eye more or less would see it. We're not going to see all that dreamy atmosphere unless it's really foggy and you're in a tropical area, kind of the thing.
You can get those scenes. But you're not making them, I guess.
Correct. So to me, success is literally going into an area, capturing that moment successfully, portraying it how it literally was seen, and having people be, whether it's amazed or moved by it, because that weren't there to be able to experience it themselves.
Nice. It's always fascinated me with social media that nobody seems to have created a platform where there are no likes and all you can do is comment, where there's no other option. Trademark grantswinburnephotography.com.
You heard it here first.
I may do this, and that's a threat. But it's just fascinated me that if anything on social media, that's what social media is actually about, is communicating, not sitting there, hey, I like this, and just doom scrolling and tapping, doom scrolling and tapping. I don't understand the joy that people find out of that. And I don't understand why people are chasing likes and that sort of thing. I'd actually really like to see a photography platform that doesn't do anything other than let you comment. You can't do anything but comment. So I may well organise to build that one.
Yeah, no, it's so anymore. Have you ever seen the movie Idiocracy?
Yes. Yeah.
Anymore, like at the time that movie came out, I didn't find it that humorous. To some degree, I did, but I watched it again. It's funny, yes, a lot funnier. Now we're almost basically living that that movie. So that's and how people would just get so consumed and on their phones with the social media aspect, and you only have their attentions for
nanoseconds.
That it's literally, if someone was literally, I think, relying on social media nowadays for the photography being found, it's hoping to go viral, you're probably going to have a long, hard road ahead of you, because society is almost losing. And I wouldn't say AI is killing photography just yet. And I don't know that it will ever. But when you're, especially with all these AI apps coming into play now, and someone can literally type in some prompt and then post that on a photography group page on a social, like say Facebook or something, and consider themselves, I mean, art is art, but I mean, consider themselves an artist or a photographer in a sense, is really killing. Like, because people are lazy. I'm not gonna lie. They don't want to get up at the early morning hours and put the work in to go out and shoot that sunrise when they can just type in a prompt on their computer and see what it spits out. They don't want to, go spend the money on an actual camera and quality glass to go be able to capture something amazing, intimate, powerful, when they just would rather do it on their cell phone, or again, type in some prompt. So the fact that the society in the trend is literally becoming lazier and lazier and wants everything kind of spoon fed in a way or falling into their lap, then when they try to showcase that in a way that makes them feel empowered and they're not getting the likes, they think they have a real gold mine here. Yeah, that's going to be devastating, just because of how society has been kind of, mentally preparing everybody around social media.
Yeah.
Whereas the photographer who's putting in the work and putting in the effort is literally sitting there scratching their head, like, why is this image, which is obviously crap, going viral, and this powerful moving image of whatever it is, wildlife or nature or whatnot, is like just hardly getting any traction. And that to me is so frustrating. That is why I try to cut back my social media time. I know it's a double-edged sword in this business.
Definitely.
But it is, like you said, Instagram started out that way, photography, but it's chasing someone else's success is never a good business plan or even a good idea in general. And that's literally what Facebook and Instagram, and even though they're buying each other out now or whatever, but they're chasing each other's ideas to where it's ultimately costed how their initial probably business plan or idea is being sacrificed.
Absolutely.
So, and that same reference can be played out in life. I mean, just not even, photography aside. So if you do decide to do this platform, do let me know, because yeah, it's nice to be able to just, share the photography and not have to worry about the likes. If someone wants to, ask for some critiques, yeah, comment away. If someone wants to talk about how the image moved them or made them feel,
Yeah,
by all means. But the whole to get wrapped up around the thumbs up or the hearts, and yeah, no, it's you got better things to do with your time than worry about that.
absolutely. Absolutely. I'm interested in how photography has changed you as a person, or what you've learnt out of your photography, and what has the world taught you about your photography.
I definitely look at the world differently. It doesn't matter if I'm driving down the road, out walking, my eyes are always scanning, and I will be driving in the car, and I'll just tell Liz, like I'm constantly, like I wouldn't say constantly, but I do rubberneck a lot. I'll be looking out the window and be like, look at how the light's hitting the mountain over there, or how the clouds, and so I find myself looking and finding those types of potential images a lot more than I used to. I would just kind of be oblivious to it, otherwise. Um, but I do find it kind of funny is when I'm not having a camera in my hand, compositions like that stick out like instantly to me.
Yep.
But as soon as you put the camera in my hand, like all that gets faded away, and it takes me longer at times to be able to find that those things. So it's definitely got me to slow down, and I wouldn't say appreciate the roses more so, because living in Alaska, I mean, that's just part of living here, is being outdoors and
Yeah.
experiencing it and taking it all in and enjoying what we have without having, the concrete jungle of just continuing on. But it definitely has me looking at the world in a different manner of light and shadow and contrast and detail, more so than what I ever imagined.
Yeah. Nice. What's your favorite spot? Where do you like to go repeatedly? And what's the place that just keeps calling you back?
There's probably two, and it's funny because what I'm about to say, you would think would probably be my home state. Which, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of amazing places here, but Norway, and the Oregon coast, I would say, are probably two places that I thoroughly enjoy. And I'll make it three. Iceland as well. Iceland. So if you would have asked me this question about 4 years ago, I would have told you Iceland. I've been there a few times, and Iceland's a photographer's playground.
Yep.
However, after being in Norway, I hope that people don't hate me for this, but Norway's kind of superseded Iceland as far as the photography for me, anyways. And so Norway for sure, and I can't wait to get back there. But yeah, I would say those locations keep calling me back, and it's just because of the geology of the landscape. I mean, it's we have mountains here in Alaska, yes, but Iceland and Norway, their mountains are formed differently. So they're a little more jagged, a little more, I wouldn't say more character than the mountains here in Alaska, but they definitely have more of that vibe. And so I would say, yeah, those two.
Nice. Nice.
Three.
What's your most memorable photo experience?
Wasn't the act of taking a photo, but it was running a workshop. And we were doing a Northern Lights workshop heading back. And this one will stand out until something comes along bigger, much bigger, and tops it. Oh. On the drive back to the lodge we were staying at, I noticed some critters on the shoulder of the road in the headlights. And at first, I thought it was a pack of wolves taking down a moose, because I saw something kind of stand up and then drop back down on the road. As I got closer, and this is like 3-4 in the morning, I could tell that it wasn't wolves, it wasn't a moose. It was a sow grizzly with cubs.
Okay.
And what I saw stand up was this cub. And when I slowed down to 5 or 10 miles an hour, and as soon as we got up close to them, she got those cubs off the road, but she spun around, and I've been bluff charged enough to know the look on a bear's face that says, you should not be here. And she charged the van while we were still moving full on. And the lady sitting right next to the sliding passenger door That's where the bear hit, and the bear started at the passenger door and ran its claws down the side of the van, and she let out this bloody, screaming, curdling sound. And I drove for about a mile before I stopped the van because I didn't know how long the bear was chasing us to assess the damage. And you can see where the bear had curled back some of the material from the door, and the crease is still there. I'm reminded every time I open that door to let people in. And everybody said that was the highlight of the whole workshop, was having that grizzly bear attack the van. Never mind the northern lights that we were photographing in the landscape. It was the that bear.
Amazing.
So that'll definitely stick out as a memory in the photography aspect. But as far as like an image goes, probably, and that's a tough one to really narrow down, because there's a few I can think of where I kind of really can kind of connect with. And one was in Denali National Park with this bear cub that I photographed, and his eyeballs is looking right into that camera, right in through into my soul, and we're locked eyes on a 400 millimeter lens, and and he's hiding behind this little tree, or this little willow branch. I don't know if he thought he was like invisible, but it was starting to kind of snow during that time. The fall colors, the bear's fur was kind of wet. I would say that's one of those moments that's probably was kind of captivating in a way of feeling, kind of going back to the success part of, getting a good wildlife shot. Another one was in Lake Clark. I would say I turned that one into a black and white image. It's a bear strolling at low tide, and the foreground's out of focus. You've got the nice bokeh balls of the sun reflecting off the little tide pools. The bear is in focus. This the mid ground there where he's at. He's nice rim light from the sun, and to me it speaks to me in a powerful way of this bear just out in the middle of his element, doing what it is that he does, and could care less about anything else. Us, yeah, social media, the whole thing. And to me, that image probably is one of my more powerful images I would say I've probably taken personally.
Fantastic. Yeah. Are you straight into your editing when you get back from a trip, or do you leave things for days, months, years?
What was the last one? Years? Yeah. So my wife is always on me. When are you going to get to? I'm like, I've edited a couple of pictures from that trip, so I've got a backlog. Yes. I don't like to. Sometimes I will go straight to it, but that's more of the culling process. And then as far as the editing goes, I might, if I'm feeling kind of spunky, yeah, I might grab an image to edit right away. But then I'm right back out photographing, and it seems like, or running tours to where that last trip I was just on starts to kind of fall to the wayside, and I'll kind of circle back and revisit all these trips that I've been on and pull an image here to image there. So, it's a constant trying to get images uploaded to my website, edited for that. That's taking the backhaul a little bit longer to process. And yeah, it's mostly on the longer side of things versus the right away.
And what about printing? Do you do any printing yourself? Do you use a lab? Do you do any?
I do a lab. I've contemplated the printing aspect, but when I start looking at how much little time that I have, I don't necessarily need to pile one more thing on my plate that I'll probably never get to.
Yeah.
So it's just as easy to send it out to a lab to print. And I only do metal or acrylic prints. My mom loves canvas. I'm not a canvas guy.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Canvas looks great from afar, but if you want to like get in close to see the detail, well, all the canvas takes all
metallic or acrylic's pretty much the usual way. There's the occasional one that I'll use, like a cotton rag or something like that. Depends a little bit on the image, So that lends itself more to sort of those foggy, dreamy sort of scenes that you capture.
Yeah,
putting them on that rag works really well. But yeah, everything else is acrylic or metallic for me too.
Yeah, because the color, the detail, I mean, they really pop on that medium, and that's ultimately why we.
It is all about the texture of the image as opposed to the texture of the media.
For sure.
Yeah. What about when you're not feeling inspired? How do you inspire yourself? How do you get around creative blocks and the times when you're just not feeling it?
That's probably when I actually get to more editing done. I will revisit past trips and just kind of, start. If I haven't started to cull any of the photos, I will start culling, then. But the images that I end up deciding to keep and edit potentially, I'll just kind of look the image over, find out what it was that made me take the picture again, try to think back
Yep.
and see if there's any improvements that need to be made or if something I don't quite like or something that maybe that might spark an idea of trying something kind of differently. And a good example of that would be, so I never ever, for whatever reason, just because it's just you're always kind of in the mindset of you don't want to move the camera, camera shake bad, you nice focus, clear image. But at the same time, doing intentional camera movement, I never seem to remind myself to do. And I've seen some images where I'm kind of like, got inspired to try that, but never seem to do it. So a trip outside here, a couple months ago, I made it a point to try to remember to do that. When I was looking around, the light just wasn't all that great, and it was a little harsh, or there just wasn't a composition around. I'm like, well, heck, why don't I try some ICM photography? I mean, this would probably work perfect here.
Yeah.
Or some abstract photography with the way the light was, because it was down on Caddo Lake down in Texas shooting the cypress trees. So the way that the reflections of all the fall colors, in the water were just kind of moving around and the way that the shimmering, I was like, I would normally never, ever even consider that as the type of photography that I do. And so I would be missing out on those opportunities because I'd be just kind of in that tunnel vision of looking for what I normally photograph and not inspired enough to kind of look outside the box.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where that helped out big time because when the light was bad, yeah, I got some awesome, I feel anyways, who cares what everybody else thinks? No, just
That's right. It's passing that up.
some nice ICM shots and some abstract kind of patterns on the water surface. So
Yeah. Yeah. We talked earlier about social media and where photography sort of sits in society. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing photographers now? And what do you see as photography's future?
if you're trying to make yourself known online as a photographer, can't I can't but say that AI is gonna probably make things hard or difficult, I should say. I wouldn't say impossible, but I will say it's probably gonna make it difficult. And I'm, myself included. It's just you're competing against something that is generated in seconds that can literally capture someone's eye in a way that, unless your editing style or your composition style can some mirror that AI image that kind of hook them in, the hook that they call, you're probably going to have a tough time because our eyes are attracted to certain things and it's almost like the fake stuff for whatever reason. And I don't know if it's just because of society over the years and the movies and Hollywood and all this stuff, that it just kind of draws the human eye in, much, much quicker than say opening a National Geographic magazine, and looking at actual images that, photographers have taken. But that's probably why that really overly edited HDR look that I'm just not a fan of is probably why, because that can be in a way depicted or argued that's AI, and the photographer's like, no, that's literally not AI. But you've edited it in a way, in the way society has gone, that now no one can believe what's real, what's not. And when you're editing something to where it almost looks too dreamy and realistic, yeah, you're going to constantly have that battle. You're going to be having to validate yourself over and over again. And so I don't think that it's the end, but it's definitely going to be a struggle for sure dealing with that aspect.
Definitely. What's the best and or worst piece of advice anyone's ever given you?
The worst piece of advice would be never move your ISO off of 100. The best piece of advice was probably to just look through my viewfinder and to eliminate all that noise. And by looking through there and just scanning around, you'll find your moment in a way. But the ISO thing, yes, I understand the concept. But as you said, rules are meant to be broken, and there's literally no rules in photography except don't overexpose unless. But then again, is that what look that you're going for?
Well, that's it.
Yes.
I've seen plenty of overexposed guys and people loving that image. So
Yeah, and I shot high key for the first time a couple months ago.
wow.
Never would have considered myself doing that either. So it's I had a lady who said that, had read and kind of impounded and ingrained in her brain, never move her ISO off of 100, and she was struggling with getting the shot.
Well, you're
being
going
too
to
dang
miss
sharp.
shots if you do that.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of having a range, is that you can
Exactly.
actually shift it so that you can get shots that you wouldn't ordinarily get if you had a fixed ISO.
Yeah, exactly. Because otherwise, every camera would just have ISO 100 as a base, and
That's
that
it.
would be it.
And nothing else. There would
Yeah.
be no switch.
Exactly. So yeah, that would those are the two advices that I've gotten that have been, I would say, most helpful, but also I'm just shaking my head like, what? Kind of with the ISO thing. So
Yeah. What's your favorite thing about being a photographer?
being outside, not answering anybody, can structure my day literally however that I want. So if I want to be out photographing the light or waiting for that light, I'm not on a schedule necessarily, unless I obviously have something planned, but where I can, if I need to sit there and wait hours on end, just kind of taking it all in. In fact, prime example of this was three nights ago. I drove north of the house here towards the Yukon River to photograph the enchanted forests, trying to capture some northern lights, or some good northern lights over them.
Yep.
Or those snow encrusted spruce trees up there. And I can remember sitting there, the lights were kind of going off, but they were kind of in a lull. And I just sat there in the snow on the side of this hill and just waiting, watching the sky, waiting for that moment. And that in itself is what's enjoyable to me, is just being immersed in this surrounding and watching this, for instance, the Northern Lights just unfold, doing what it is that they do and building into what it is that they ended up turning it into. And it's the quietness, the peacefulness of it all is really what I enjoy. And because then when you come back into like the city life and you got the hustle and the bustle and the chaotic and all the noises that are associated with all that, you can kind of maybe sometimes just you go mad, and you can't to escape all that again and get out there amongst that. And for some people, it's their zen, being out there and just utter quietness and surrounded. And that to me, I probably take that for granted just because I'm born, here and raised in Alaska. So that's really all that I know. But I do know that when I travel to places and there's big cities, I am just like, there's no way that I could live this way. No. Visit, yes. Living, no.
Sure. What's your least favorite thing about being a photographer?
My least thing is probably, and this might shock some people, and it's not so much about being a photographer as it is photographers in general, is egos have really taken over a lot of people, especially if they've had success early on. And so if they feel as though they are superior or their work is superior than others, like they will kind of showcase that on future peers that they might meet or come in contact with. And that just ultimately drives me up the wall.
Yeah.
There's nothing more that I hate than a photographer who thinks essentially their stuff doesn't stink, and someone who's trying to improve, someone who's trying to potentially, and heck, they might even idolize this individual too, which really, is upsetting. But trying to come at it from an approach that I'm better than you, and you're just knocking that other person, photographer, down and thinking that they're never going to achieve what it is that they're ultimately trying to achieve, that just drives me up the wall.
Yeah.
And I have experienced it at times. I feel like, I've met photographers who have been in the business longer than myself. And at first I thought, these are cool people to get to know and kind of associate with and kind of kept in contact. But then it's like the contact over time, when now there's distance, starts to fall off. But it's that you still see, especially with social media, because you can see who's all liking whose stuff now. You see like the little clicks of photographers, liking their stuff and whatever.
Yep.
And it's like, well, I thought that we were, getting along, getting to know each other. And so like the click stuff, that drives me nuts. And so that's being a photographer. That's what I would hate. I hate the most about it is the clickiness, the egos, because ultimately, especially now, because if you want to take a step further, as we mentioned about like the AI, right, and social media, if you're literally against your fellow compadres, you're not helping each other out. And the AI stuff and all that stuff can start to weasel itself in and take over more. And then it's even going to make our jobs even harder.
Yeah.
But it's also whereas if we come band together and stick together, you got strength in numbers there. So it's that was probably the least that I hate. And to fall back to your question about success, I just realized I had a gentleman come up to me. I was shooting on the coastline, I think at Oregon, and asked what I was doing. And I told him, and he said, I appreciate you guys, photographers, being out here photographing this stuff because I would have never known that this even existed.
Yep.
And so by us photographers capturing, and by sharing our work, people like himself see it and then they can go to appreciate it, in person. But even with that comes with a grain of salt, because like Madeira, for instance, the Fanal Forest is being cut off and blocked off because of the overrun of people and just being stupid about, visiting those types of locations. Yes. So there's always a good and a bad with, being a photographer. And so the bad part too would be over exploiting an area that gets inundated and overran to where its beauty is no longer there. Yeah. It's just totally, in a lot of places are coming down on the restrictions because of the other term I hate is social influencers, and it's, you think you're this type of a person and you're showcasing this, but ultimately there's a way I think you could go about it without exploiting an area.
Yeah.
So I'm very cautious of who I take to certain locations that I photograph. And I never really ever reveal any location that I photograph by name, just because it's like your fishing hole. You don't just tell the world where your hotspot is. Right. If you go back there, you ain't gonna be no fish.
I do a lot of photography here in Sydney at local beaches, and everyone knows what the beaches are here and they're public places and whatever. So I don't have a problem about telling people there. But if I'm out in the bush somewhere and I find something that's a little bit special, it's not that I want to keep it to myself. It's that I want to protect it from being overrun. Not that I think anyone's going to go racing there simply because I've taken a shot of it, but I know that that is something that is real and could potentially happen. And I think it's important, as you say. It's not about gatekeeping. It's not about saying, I'm better than you or this information is secret. It's about protecting those areas and making sure that people aren't overrunning them. You talked about the Fennel Forest in Madeira. I was there a few years ago and it wasn't foggy, which annoyed the hell out of me. I went twice and so there was no fog, both times I went there, but there were hordes of people. And there were hordes of people not just walking around admiring the forest and so forth. There were people climbing on the trees to take social media pics and that sort of thing. And it's like, oh my God, can you just stop and think about what you're doing and why you're doing it?
They try to argue that they're doing a service by, entertaining or bringing the entertainment to their followers and people or bringing the wherever it is that they're at to the forefront. And that's all fine and well. But you also have to approach it from a conservationist standpoint. I mean, a lot of nature conservation is come about through photographers visiting locations over and over again and seeing how the climate has changed or the erosion or just, things in general that have been documented. And so and again, rolls into your little influencer status of when you're going to these locations, especially a place like Fanal Forest, who's very delicate ecosystem there. And when have your head up your butt being stupid about it, it's literally going to attract all that kind of same attention. And it's just going to kind of keep going on because everybody thinks they have to be standing in the exact same location as the individual who took the photo to capture whatever it is that they want. Why not be your own individual and be creative Sure, go to that location, but look for a different composition or something that speaks to, not to
Try to do
million.
something that's a little bit different.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, we're going to have to wrap up shortly, but I've got a couple more questions for you. Are there any photographers out there that you think I need to be talking to on the podcast?
I've got a couple of friends that might be up for it. Nye Simmons and TJ Thorne.
Spoken to TJ, yeah.
Oh, yep. You've spoken to TJ.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's actually the one that mentioned to me about the whole viewfinder. Yeah. Nye Simmons would be a probably a good one to talk to.
Awesome. Thank you for that. My last question is one I've been asking from right at the beginning of the podcast, and it's an issue that divides a lot of people. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
I do.
Cool.
You probably wasn't expecting that answer by the look on your face, but yeah, no,
some don't.
Yeah, no, it's I'll definitely eat pineapple on pizza. Now, strawberries on pizza? No.
My girls are into strawberry and Nutella pizzas, which I just kind of find,
Yeah, I'm with you.
I guess it's strawberries and Nutella on toast to a certain degree, but whatever. All right, it's been brilliant having this time to talk to you, Michael. Thank you so much for being on the show. Where can people find your work?
So my website is facetheoutdoorsphotography.com. My Instagram is Michael Schultz Photography. That's generally where I live to some degree, but oh, sorry, I just had a dang brain fart there. Might have to re-edit on this aspect. All right, so let me start that one over. facetheoutdoorsphotography.com is my photography website. Michael Schultz Photography is my Instagram handle. Either location there, you can get a hold of me easy enough.
All right, fantastic. Thanks so much, Michael. It's been great talking to you.
I appreciate the opportunity, and no, I've had a joy as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, mate.
Thank you.
If you've ever been on a frontier of the world, leave a comment below. I'm really interested to hear about your experiences and your experience in wilderness photography. Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at gruntswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Vero, Photo, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because it really helps to get the podcast seen and heard. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.